Welcome back everyone to the MX-5 5-cylinder build. In the past video we've made the engine mounts. There's two mounts on each side of the engine and there's a gearbox behind it, and the gearbox needs to be mounted to the chassis as well. That's what we'll be doing today. We'll be making two large pieces of angle iron with studs on it and making a little frame that bolts onto the bottom of the chassis, and we'll mount the engine mounts to that. There's already these two blocks which will serve as our engine mounts. The two bits of angle iron are going here and there'll be studs like this. I'll show you later, and we'll have that from the front to the back, and between the pickup points, which are about here, you can see the transition right there. From here back there's another larger piece of the frame rail back there, and we'll be in between these two. This is to weld it to the frame rail and to the chassis, like the bottom, because it's all very thin on these cars, and to distribute the load going into the body, because this car never came with a gearbox mount. They used to have a PPF, which is a power plant frame, like a huge aluminum bracket, went from the gearbox all the way to the diff, which this is the old PPF. We cut it in half last week. We made a diff mount from the old PPF. So let's get started. Countersunk screws, which I'll mount to those, you'll see in a minute, and they will bolt the brace, which will be made out of this 20 by 20 millimeter 2 millimeter thick piece of square tube, and they'll make the first part of the mount, and then behind that there'll be an X brace for the chassis to make it a lot stiffer, as there's a lot more force going through the chassis instead of the original with the PPF. The plan here is to use a countersinking bit to make place for the countersunk screws. They'll go in like this. I hope to get them countersunk flush with the top, and I'll weld them at the top so you have a stud sticking out to the bottom. This way the stud is being held in by not just the weld but also the slight chamfer that's on the inside of the hole that's going to be here, and it'll be quite robust. Here's the two bars. I'll be drilling holes now and putting in the bolts and welding it from the other side. Second day of working on this X-brace and the diff mount. We're gonna get this coated on the back and the last bolts finished up so I can mount it to the car. Yeah. I lost it. These two faces are going against the chassis, and so they need to be protected. I'm gonna paint them and eventually seam seal and paint them on the outside as well. So the next step is going to be fun. It's removing all of the underseal along this edge and the top edge until about here. The brackets that I made are about 80 centimeters long, so they start in between this seam and the other seam right here. So I'm gonna be attacking it using this bristle brush, metal wire brush on a drill, corded drill, and I'm gonna get quite dirty, I guess. So this wasn't a lot of fun. I cleaned the surfaces that I will be welding the chassis to, the brace to. Cleaned it all around and painted the inside of the back side that's going to be facing the top rail. And I'm gonna weld it in now, and then I'm gonna have to do the other side. This really isn't fun. I'm covered in shit, but anything to get this mount done and this swap done.
Yeah.
This is it welded in, just at the bottom side, because if I were to weld at the top, my carpet would set on fire. So that's one of the next steps, is take out the interior and the carpet, so I can weld it at the top as well. And tack it for now, and then when we have the mounts made and everything, we can weld it fully, or at least stitch weld it like 30 millimeters every 10 centimeters or something, and then I can seam seal it and coat it as much as possible to prevent all the rust. So now I have to do the same on the other side. Here we go. For this right side, I have to take out these fuel lines. I already removed the rear brake line that's going here, and I will need to move those to the other side anyway, because the engine is like flipped. So the intake side from the MX-5 engine is the output side, the exhaust side of the Volvo engine, and these brake lines need to come from the other side, as there will be an exhaust as well. And these need to go out of the way for me to make the bracket here and clean off the area like I did on the other side. And to take off those lines, you have to go here, well, at least the return line that is, and underneath this bracket there's the fuel pump assembly, and I need to take off the lines there, and the feed line is underneath at the filter, which I can just take off normally. So let's get these lines removed and get the metal underneath cleaned. Dit beunzing van de vorige eigenaar. Kijk hoe die plaatjes zijn gemaakt bij de... Dat ik het zo liggen, ik ga zo verbuigen. Die zijn sowieso vast verbogen. If you're ever working on cars, this is a good thing to do. Keep the bolts where they're supposed to go, and I like to get some, this is painter's tape, but some tape over the bolt so it can't fall out. I can just remove that easily later, but this won't be lost, this bolt, because I've got so many parts laying around. It's hard to keep track of them all, let alone the bolts that go everywhere. So I'm gonna keep this back there. Ja, jij ook? Ja, ik ook. Unfortunately, no treasure to be found. We have found funny stuff before in a few cars, like which we're in Europe, so it's uncommon. We found a unshot shell with a bullet still inside from some, like a 9mm or something. But no secrets here, unfortunately. Maybe better. Oh shit. With this engine being slightly longer, by having one cylinder more, the sway bar is actually well, if it could be bolted in, it interfere with the front crank pulley. So we took it apart, and currently it's held on with tape, and it should move like, there's this bolt right here which goes into the bracket. It should move like maybe 3 centimeters forward on both sides. So we're going to remove these 2 brackets for the radiator, and then we'll remove the brackets for the sway bar and see if we can move them forward. Also probably make like a plate for new bolting holes, and that'll be fine too. And Amy came up with this solution for the angle, the new angle of the sway bar, because the end links will be slightly more pointed forward if we wouldn't change it. But on the lower control arm there's this tab which it bolts to. And she came up with a solution: if you would flip this the other way, so the back side of the bracket would face me, the whole bottom position of the sway bar end link would move forward as well, about the same amount. So that wouldn't impact our sway bar movement and position as much. So unfortunately these, although they are bolted in, they're also spot welded right here, and on the other side it's the same with the spot weld in between. So we're gonna drill these out and move them over. Same on the other side, drill them out, move them over and weld them back onto the chassis rail. Here you can see the other side. There it is. So these are the bars welded in, and I cut this piece of square tubing to size. Should fit neatly into here, and I'm going to make some cut off some pieces of angle iron and drill a hole in and weld it to this bar. I've also put a jack underneath the gearbox to put it up as much as possible, and a piece of, I think it's 5mm plate, to keep a bit of clearance from the top of the gearbox to the chassis, because when it vibrates I don't want the gearbox to vibrate onto the chassis, because that makes a horrible noise, and it needs to have some clearance. So that's pushed up all the way up, and then I'm going to be making my mounts and welding it right here as well to the chassis mounted gearbox assembly thing, whatever you want to call it. And of course it's on these rubber bits, so the vibrations from the gearbox and the drivetrain won't go into my chassis mount, thus to the chassis itself. So here's what I made. It's 2 pieces of angle iron with just a simple hole in there. And this bar is temporarily pushed in all the way at the top. It's slightly lower than this bar because there's a ridge right here that I didn't see on the scans, but doesn't really matter. So this is pushed up all the way, and I've temporarily bolted these in, and I'll just stack them together and make this little round and make it look nice. And then later in the future, when everything's mounted, I will need to clearance this on, I think, this side, because that's where the downpipe goes, and I can't have the exhaust go beneath, like about here, so it has to go over. It's gonna be quite tight, but I'm probably going to pinch the pipe a bit so it's taller but skinnier. And yeah, so that's pretty good. I'm very happy with it. I'm gonna tack this in now. Zeg het? Wil je het ophalen? Ja. Oh, daar zit hij nog aan de... Yo. Here's the first version of the diff mount. It's just stacked up for now, but we don't need much more than just stacks to hold it in and get everything positioned. Stop. Goed. Een loslossen uit de auto. So here it is, the chassis brace, the X-brace and the gearbox mount. Actually slotted these in the end because they're at an angle, you can't bolt this straight up. They tend to get stuck, so I just made it so you bolt in the mount here and on the other side, and then you slide in the mounts themselves. They're held in by two fasteners at the top and the bottom using the original BMW bracket that came with the gearbox. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. I am going to be welding this eventually, and the next time you'll see underneath the car, you'll see that the angle iron will be welded, like stitch welded and coated, which we're gonna do next, but it's boring, so I'm not gonna film that. That's underneath the car. At the top we just mounted the swaybar. We actually ended up removing the bottom mounts and stepping them over just one bolt hole, because there's two bolts, and Amy made it quite nicely and the clearance is pretty good. So I think we're gonna stick with this, especially because the Radiator support brackets also fit still, and it's pretty nice. I have got a second fan because I used to run the original MX-5 fan, but that was way too thick, so I removed it, and I've got another like thin slim fan, and it's going to be mounted here. We have reached quite a interesting part in the project. There's a few separate things like the fueling system, which is half complete, the turbo, which needs all its lines, and the exhaust, and the cooling system, which still needs to be made. So I'm gonna be filming as much as I can do, which isn't all in one go. I can't do the whole exhaust in one go or the whole fuel system. So the next couple of videos, they will be batched, so you'll see the whole exhaust being made or the whole cooling system, but that's gonna be in different pieces of time. So you might actually see a bit of exhaust already being done whilst I'm doing the video of the cooling system. So we'll hop around to different bits, but in reality you'll only see the part that's most interesting. So yeah, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.